Good evening. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I call the Tuesday, January 16th Peninsula School District Board of Directors meeting to order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. It will likely be a quick night tonight, so we're going to roll through with this agenda approval. Is there any discussion prior to the vote? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved by David and seconded by Jennifer. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Agenda is approved. Comments from the community. We have one comment this evening. Mr. Nance, if you would like to come up, you'll have 3 minutes. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Nance. I graduated from Cape Harbor High School 2 years ago. I'm an interested citizen and public school supporter. So, hey, what I want to do, the discussion you were having beforehand reminded me, I wanted to get up and thank you for your policy on mobile phone use. I just think that is really great. I know that is a hard thing to do. But I think you are setting the example for school districts around the country in terms of how to deal with mobile phones. You know, none of us have got these things figured out. I mean, I spend too much time on mine. I think we all do. And but yet kids, they need guardrails. They need barriers to prevent them from doing what might be too much of a good thing, might be too much of a bad thing. We don't really know. So I just wanted to get up and just express my appreciation for taking that bold move, because I know you've gotten some negative feedback and some positive feedback, but I just think it's the right thing to do, and I just want to applaud you guys for doing it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I will turn your attention to the back of the room here, and Cassius, I'll call you out for being part of that and one of our student leaders on that. So we would not have done that without the input of our students. So Lori, Tanya, and I over the summer met with a bunch of students, and they really helped craft some of that policy, the language, and made sure that it really fit with what they thought was best for students. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for really, really taking on ownership of that. Okay. Our next item is the consent agenda. I would like to pull item 5.3 just for clarification. This is a donation. Preston, could you just speak for a minute about nutrition services and what happens or how the district handles a student who might be in an account deficit, how we handle lunches and what we do and don't do?
Yes, so I think it's important to note that anytime, we never, ever will turn a student away, even if they are in arrears, if they're in the red in terms of their lunch amount that they owe. We have lunches available, and we will continue to give student lunches. But just for information, this is information only, our total debt for the district currently is $100,000, $135 and $135.71. When we look at different schools, the key Peninsula schools are the higher poverty schools that we have. Henderson Bay has the highest poverty, which makes sense as it pulls from both sides of the district. So if we look at overall, Vaughan is $8,000 with total debt, Evergreen $5,129, KPMS $16,564, and then Minter $5,530. Because Evergreen and Vaughan are free this school year because they qualify for the community eligibility provision, their debt, this will clear out their debt, and it will not reaccumulate. So that is a wash. As the state and federal guidelines are considering lowering the poverty percentages, we may see additional schools being added to the CEP in the future. So what that means is, with this donation, that pot of 100,000 plus goes directly onto that and then just zeroes it out. And so we know that families, many times, there is minimal paperwork in order to qualify. But we also know that there are families that even with that still don't qualify. And so this is a very generous donation, and we are very, very grateful to any of our community members. But just know that we do not turn students away. So like if I am like $10 or $15 in arrears and I go up and I get lunch, I am given lunch. It's not thrown away in the garbage. You're not humiliated in front of others. Those things are not allowed. So just to make that clear.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I'll second.
Aye. All opposed? Motion is carried. Consent agenda has been approved. We have nothing under reports or old business this evening. Under new business, item 8.1 is the approval of a change order, Key Peninsula Middle School project. Is there any discussion prior to the vote? Is there a motion to approve item 8.1?
I make a motion that we approve item 8.1, approval of change order number 9.
Okay. Is there a second?
I will second it.
It's been moved by David and seconded by Jennifer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is carried. Item 8.1 has been approved. Do we have any board committee reports this evening? No? Okay, we'll roll into the superintendent's report.
This is quick.
Oh, yeah.
Goodness. Well, I hope that you all had a meaningful Martin Luther King holiday yesterday. And coming back on time, I have to say, we were spared a lot of ice and snow. We were not spared. We had just pockets of broken pipes, some of which we just discovered when we went into the buildings today, but all is well. And I want to thank the staff who were inconvenienced. We just appreciate them coming on time and running school as normal. This morning, we had an opportunity to have our 4th session with Dr. Scott Seaman from the Associated, for the AWSP, which is our Principals Association, excuse me. And I have to say, we were really discussing the art of leadership, and it was a really good, meaningful, it was a good way to come back after a 3-day holiday. So, and I hope that our principals really feel valued. This is a model that Dr. Seaman is recommending at the national level, so that principals are supported throughout their leadership journey. We know the attrition for superintendents and principals and teachers require that there's ongoing professional development and acknowledgement of leadership. And so our principals are working through. And the really nice thing is that they're all working together. So it's the very few times that we have K through 12 principals. So we have the principals and the assistant principals and the deputy principals all together for about 3 hours per month. So it's a pretty powerful time. And Dr. Seaman likes to come out here because he says that we have amazing leaders. So that's always good to hear. This weekend, we start our unified basketball. So hope to see you. I know that there were multiple dates that were sent out on Saturday. I understand that there's 100 student volunteers for that program. In fact, Miss Buys said that now it's difficult to even figure out who's with who because she has so many volunteers. So that is wonderful and amazing. And next time we meet, you will be given the calendars. So just know that our future calendars will be coming in front of you next time we meet. And with that, I think I'm done.
Okay, here's where it gets long. I'm just kidding. The last item is board discussion and comments, and I just want to thank Director Butler for suggesting that maybe we take a little bit of time to talk about what legislative action is happening and affecting schools. So I am going to probably, if it's okay, David, kick it off to you as our ledge rep, and then maybe everyone can just kind of jump in. If you have comments outside of legislative stuff as well, certainly share that. But talk about some of the bills that we're looking at.
So, yeah, so as a ledge rep, Natalie and I are ledge reps, and when I found out that she wanted to talk about what's currently going on that's impacting schools, not all of it's would potentially impact our school district, but some of the more important bills that are out there. House Bill 1960, put forward by Stoner, is prototypical school staffing. One of the things we heard at our superintendent legislative meeting that we went to in Pierce County a couple months ago, Crescent and I, was that they're trying to increase state funding to pay for paraeducators. And so they think that might get some legs. They're just not quite sure, because if paras, then what about others? So, and it costs money. So that's one of them, but we think it did pass out, so we're hoping that that'll get some help with us for paras, because if the state starts paying for paraeducators, that's less that we have to use our levy dollars to pay for, so we can use them for something else. House Bill 1368, zero-emission school buses. We also talked about this at the Pierce County legislative meeting, which I'm not a fan of. Requires that school districts move towards 100% EV vehicles and school buses. And, you know, we just saw this with this really bad winter front in the country. All the electric vehicles are sitting frozen. They can't charge their batteries, and they don't have anywhere to go. And so making it mandatory that we shift to EV, WASDA agrees with us that it's not quite time yet to move towards 100% EV. We don't have the infrastructure in place for that. And we've gotten reports on how great propane buses are. They're very powerful and more efficient. So, and you change out a school bus EV battery, it's really expensive. So I don't think that the EV mandate is going to make it out of this session, just because of the pushback on that. House Bill 1843, school district elections regarding bonds, trying to get to a simple majority. One of the bills by Representative Harris is potentially 55% for bonds. You know, I've been outspoken in my 10 years on the board that I don't support 50% for school bonds. The levies, yes, but when we're going out for a 500, maybe not us, but other districts that go out for a 500 or 600 $1 million bond, that's a lot of money. So one side, I know one group wants a simple majority, the other group for 60, but there's been talk over the past couple of years about maybe meet in the middle and go to 55, because a lot of the bonds fail right at 56, 57, so maybe don't go all the way to 50, but 55, maybe we can find some common ground. They don't believe that's going to happen this session, just because it would take 60% to change it, and they don't see that happen in this short session. Student transportation, Senate Bill 5873, providing adequate and predictable student transportation. Senator Wellman has been trying to push that. She doesn't think that it's going to make it out just because of additional cost. Same thing that happened to us this past year. She doesn't think that's going to happen. Senate Bill 6014, also by Senator Wellman, special ed cap. They are looking to increase the special education funding from 15% to 17.5%. Unfortunately, that doesn't impact our school district at all, just because of the way our school district is built out. And the extra funding is spread out across all 295 school districts. So even though it goes up 2.5%, they talked about this at the Pierce County meeting that Crescent and I went to. I think statewide, last legislative district session, they only increased special ed funding by $2.5 million. They thought that was amazing, but when you spread $2.5 million around 295 school districts, it's really a joke. So they might get 2.5% extra on that. And then House Bill zero emission school buses, they got two different bills out there, but it's the same. They don't expect that to move forward. Then lastly, So another thing that really is not good, and I know Jennifer, all of us would agree on this, but since Jennifer's on the capital gain, capital project thing, is part of the funding that we got to really help put us over the cliff to get 6 new schools instead of 4 off the bond was SCAP funding, okay? And so the legislature now and the governor are looking to eliminate SCAP funding for capital funding and instead of using capital gains tax to pay for capital projects, which is a horrible idea. SCAP is supposed to help pay for capital budgets and help for school funding, and the capital gains tax was supposed to supplement SCAP, but they're looking to eliminate SCAP and use capital gains. So WASDA, WASA, AWSP, WSPTA, WASBO, everyone sent a letter to Governor Inslee, and I'll just read it. Say, Governor Inslee, thank you for introducing a capital budget that prioritizes our students and invests in K-12 student facilities or school facilities. We're particularly grateful for your investment in School Construction Assistance Program, SCAP, the Small District Modernization Grant Program, and Clean Classroom Air. Your proposal funds a substantial increase to SCAP, the first funding increase the program has seen in over 20 years. Thank you for recognizing the needs of our schools and prioritizing student health and safety. Our associations are writing you today to express our concern and opposition to funding SCAP almost exclusively with funds from Common School Trust Account. Historically, SCAP has relied on bond funding, which provides school districts with financial stability as they attempt to pass costly and technical voter-approved capital bonds. We are particularly concerned that if bond funds are repurposed to other programs, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to get them back for future school construction. Without stable bond funding, school districts will rely on state budget forecasts and funding from cash accounts to support school construction projects. Cash-funded SCAP projects pose a high risk to school districts as there is no guarantee the state will have the funding necessary to complete projects in conjunction with a district's capital plan and project timeline approved by voters. Without predictable and stable funding, districts could run out of resources to complete their capital projects or abandon projects entirely. We respectfully request the legislature return bond funding to the SCAP program, ensuring our districts have the stability they need to pursue their capital projects. Thank you for your investments in our students and school facilities, and thank you for consideration for this request. Last legislative session, a year ago, Natalie and Chris and I were at the Day on the Hill, and we met with all of our state legislatures, and we were talking about bond capital projects funding, and Senator Randall asked us if, or asked me specifically if I would support capital gains tax to support funding for schools, and I said no. And the reason for that is simple. Initially, years ago, they said the lottery, state lottery, would pay for education, and they did it for like a year or two, and then they repurposed it to other pet projects. Then marijuana was supposed to, marijuana tax was supposed to pay for schools, and that been repurposed again. So it wasn't necessarily, I'm opposed to capital gains tax, period, but the fact that they said that they're going to use it for schools, I just think is not going to actually happen. Maybe they'll do it for 1 year, and then they'll repurpose it to something else. So I don't know if Jennifer wants to speak to the problems that eliminating SCAP for helping out with bond funding, because this is sort of her niche, but it's not good. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Well, can you clarify? I'm a little confused. My understanding was it's changing the revenue source for SCAP, not eliminating SCAP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the bill was for reducing 50% threshold 50%. The SCAP is something different.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yes. Because I didn't. Because when we had our presentation, which did I send that to you? we should, I don't know, if there's a way to make it public. It was really interesting if you're really interested in things like funding capital projects. But a graduate student at University of Washington School of Education did her master's thesis and presented it on SCAP, and basically, like, not only is the program inadequate, but the moral of the story was fewer and fewer districts are able to pass bonds, which means fewer and fewer districts are able to access SCAP funds. And of those funds accessed, they're going to fewer and fewer projects that are more and more expensive.
I
Right?
think what they're saying is that bond funding has helped fund SCAP,
State bonds.
state, yeah.
Yeah.
And that by eliminating, bond funding for SCAP and using cash accounts,
Yeah.
it poses a risk to the
Yeah, yeah,
program.
yeah.
So they want state bonds to continue to fund.
Yeah, because the other thing that they talked about are the small district modernization grants and stuff like that being funded from Timber Trust, from the Timber Trust, which, again, you know, they spend so much time. It's kind of like the $2 million for special ed spread across the strait. It's like, okay, you have a couple $100 million for district modernization grants. It sounds like a giant number, and it is, but when you spread that across the strait, and we all know how much just 6 schools cost, now you have an entire district that's
Right.
trying to share $100 million for.
You want to talk to that?
Yeah, I don't have the answer. I don't know exactly if the funding is a swap or if it's established dollars and then added. I think that we should be very cautious if we are going to support something, and we should all know
Yeah.
exactly, because we've seen that in the past, right? We've seen what we're told and then what actually happened. And, you know, the other thing that I would say is if you look at the bond passage numbers recently, it is very, very, very low.
There were only 2 last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would question any change in funding right now to, like, what would this solve?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, and I think that sort of the argument, right, that the Wakayakum lawsuit was putting forth is that, in a way, the attention gets put on this 60-50 threshold, whatever, as being really the barrier to funding, when really that's almost a red herring. The barrier is the disparity in overall assessed valuation between gigantic districts along the I-5 corridor that have Amazon and REI and all these big commercial entities contributing to their tax base, right? So the irony is these gigantic districts where if you pass a $500 million bond and your taxes go up 1 cent per 1,000, right? You try to build a school in a small rural district like Wakayakum, and for a similar amount, I mean, it's like an $8 to $10 per 1,000. So it's just, you know, that model, right, is it just the way that the school districts are the way the borders are, and the way just kind of our state demographics, you know, I-5 corridor, lots of industry, lots of commercial interests to help those of you look, Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue. I mean, the other thing is these districts can pass hundreds of millions of dollars for a levy, and like at 50%, and still only have a couple of cents increase, right, or change, if any. And they're the ones that pass at 60%, right? So it just, it's kind of like it's a compounding factor, the supermajority, but it really, the root factor is, it's just when you have 1,000 kids in a school district and it's mostly farmland, like you don't have the bonding capacity.
Yeah. But I think the other thing that Marissa, when I talked to Marissa today, was the concern is that if you take away the current source of SCAP, and say you're gonna replace it with capital gains, then based on what's happened previously on, we're gonna use this to pay for schools, and then it actually didn't, then you're losing, maybe it's not totally adequate funding for SCAP, but to eliminate that guaranteed source, and with something we're gonna, and they even passed the capital gains tax, so they're gonna say they'll supplement it, now they wanna use that, but what if the capital gains doesn't pass? Now you've completely lost funding, so that's their, so rethink it, so.
No, not particularly. It's just, I think certainly for me, it's starting now my beginning of my third year serving on the board, and I realize now at the beginning of the year, okay, let's look at our legislative priorities. Oh, wait, it's too late. So I think I'm glad we're starting to I think we're doing a good job paying attention to what's in progress, but I also think we need to, now is also the time to start looking actually to next year, right? To be able to start that. And I think when I was looking, we have, the WASDA gives us that document with all of the different priorities, which is pretty substantial. I mean, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff in there. But in my read through what's on there, the thing that stood out to me, which is what has been in the headlines nationally, what have we been focused on here with literacy? Nothing. So I think that's kind of interesting. There was an article maybe 2 weeks ago about how New York State, the governor just came out with, really talking about one of the priorities within public education was science of reading based, examining how they teach reading and how they teach literacy and making that a priority. And it's that I think as a board, kind of building on the work, not only of our literacy task force, but, looking at our special education parent advisory committee and harnessing the knowledge that we have here to be able to start really pushing some advocacy around that, I think we are out in front, but it's also expensive and a little bit lonely, right? Especially when it's happening all over the country.
Yeah.
So,
In 2015, we did a position statement for WASDA for that handbook to make a modification around how to utilize, when you tax new homes at those schools. Impact fees, man, brain freeze. Yeah, so we submitted a position modification to WASDA. So what you might do is your literacy task force, maybe you could draft a position statement for WASDA and then put that forward. And then maybe we could have Chris do something to put a separate position statement forward on behalf of our school district to WASDA around the cell phone policy. Because those are both sort of a new thing, so we could take the lead on doing that, getting that out there early.
yeah,
Okay, just something to think about.
no, absolutely.
Well, I don't have much to add, but it's interesting that you say we feel like we're behind, because we can talk about it all year long, but you kind of have to wait for the pre-filing of bills to know what it's going to pass. So, in we each belong to different organizations, and this whole past year, we've been so focused on literacy. And so it's been a little bit of a dance between we need the legislature to do something for us versus, but don't pick it for us because you're going to ruin it, because we have the experts, we have our parents, and we're making such great strides that way. So what I had hoped was that there would be some kind of a budget proviso that we could maybe pilot a program or be selected for something. So hopefully, Creston, your work with the Hunt Institute will lead to that. But we've talked about it, and I have talked with legislators, and I have been involved with a group that has leadership on the education committee. And so when I'm told our priorities are going to be financial literacy, exiting student interviews, a couple of things, and I said, okay, but school districts really are desperate for capital funding, special education funding, transportation, and literacy. And I look and see what's being discussed this week. Oh, CCFE mandatory, financial literacy mandatory. There's something that was heard last week about making it mandatory for families or for school districts to submit exit interviews. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think, between what our priorities are and what their priorities are. And I don't mean our three legislators. I think they're very engaged and they listen to what we say, but as a legislative body, there's so many advocacy groups, whether it's WASDA or any of the WA agencies that support schools. We're all saying the same thing. So we got to break through the ice. We've got Day on the Hill coming up on the 28th, so we're going to take students down to that. That's that Sunday event. And then on the 29th, I think some of us are going to go down there as well and meet with legislators. But I think you're right. It's just maybe having a constant presence and for all of you in the audience and all who are listening, there are so many opportunities for you to engage in this as well. I highly recommend that you go on to the ledge.wa.gov website, and you can sort through by which chamber, whether it's the Senate committee or the House committee, and look at their education platforms and agendas. And you don't have to go down there. You can remotely testify, or even just log your position as pro or con. And I know that our legislators, the three of them, our representatives and our senator, look to see what their constituents, they look for names that they recognize, and it does impact the way that they vote on certain bills. So a lot of these are new. They might not make it through. So it seems like a fire hose right now of all these bills. I feel like we're behind the curve if we hadn't testified, or we're not quite sure what our position is. But as they push through, I would love to see all of us testify on bills, or, you know, speak up for what's important to us, and just make that be something that we're comfortable with. And our staff as well. We've got transportation, special ed. There's opportunity for those professionals to really voice their opinions. So tomorrow, most of the bills were heard yesterday for this week. There's a couple that were heard today. Just if anyone is curious on this, let's see, tomorrow, something about including weighted grade point averages on high school transcripts. So I think that's interesting. I think colleges kind of waived that anyway, so I'm not sure what the value is about, other than how you rack and stack valedictorians. I don't know that that's really a high priority, but reorganizing requirements governing high school graduation, providing public school students with opportunities for cultural expression at commencement ceremonies, expanding and strengthening career and technical education core plus programs. So those are pretty interesting. Friday, addressing fentanyl and other substance prevention education. And my papers are all out of order. Also on Friday, expanding and streamlining eligibility for early learning programs. There's a lot of early learning coming on Friday. So funding for support for infants and toddlers, clarifying requirements for subsidized childcare, and designating early learning coordinators at educational service districts. So these are things that you're interested in. Please jump online and
Go ahead, Carson.
I just wanted to, so last week I was asked by Dr. Quentin Hatch to join a team to testify on Stop the Bleed legislation, which would require training in the high school or in schools. And so I joined he and Dr. Robinson from the University of Washington, and so we testified on that. That afternoon in the Senate, was a lot of fentanyl education, prevention, and so there was pretty powerful testimony from students. Lake Washington had a large student group. But one thing to note, because there were so many people that were testifying on those bills, and they only have a certain amount of time, we only had 1 minute. And that was something to note, because you might think that you have 3 minutes. And so a very close friend of mine, actually my son, who does a lot of lobbying, he said, you should probably have your 2 minutes, have your 1 minute speech, and then have your 30-second speech. So something to note about that. But I found it pretty powerful. We also had a conversation, and will have a conversation. So in front of PESB, we will be having a conversation about military families, spouse certification, recognition by the state of Washington. And so that is something that I will be advocating later this week. They do this for doctors. Dr. Hatch and I had a good discussion. Doctors, nurses, RNs, LPNs are recognized. So if you move from one state to the other, so the whole idea is not to put barriers in the way of spouses who are following their spouse to their next military base. So I will be having that conversation as well.
So you need a military spouse?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. And I did want to speak just briefly about literacy. I, too, have not heard necessarily that there's any legislation, but just know that we are very serious in our working with the Hunt Institute around the state of Washington. We'll have a plan. There should be dedicated funding, and that will have to go through legislative. Please know that I am first in line asking to be part of any kind of pilot, any kind of grant, anything like that. I think that we are one of the few districts that are dedicating funds right now for letters training for as many staff as we can, and more to come on that. So lastly, I would just say one thing that we are very cognizant about in our school district, we are one of the 29 school districts that have lost our 4% experience factor, staff experience factor. And so just know that we have met as a group of school districts, because if they ran the numbers now, because they ran the numbers during COVID, where we had extra teachers, we had extra young teachers, our data is very clear that we would still qualify for the 4%. So more to come on that.
Say one last, sort of wrap it up, the WASDA, like you said, there's like 180 positions at WASDA, and the members of WASDA, the resolution committee, committee decide which ones are gonna move forward or whatever, but the ledge reps, like myself and Natalie at the school district across the state, come together at that annual legislative conference to discuss which positions we move forward for consideration in Olympia. So that's why I'm really thrilled that we eliminated the weighted vote, because now it's one vote, one board. And so like if you brought forward a position to WASDA and the ledge committee or ledge conference next year takes up that position for literacy or on cell phones, now one school district or two school districts can't say we don't think that's important. And so I'm hopeful that school districts across the state that might have important issues that they want to talk about for capital funding or things that are important to them will get more traction. And the reason I say that is WASDA, when we go on the Hill, WASDA takes their 5 talking points that the group comes together and says, here's, like we say what we think our school district's top 10 are, and all 295 school districts do the same thing. And then they whittle it down to the top 5, okay, based on ranked choice voting. And then WASDA reps have to go to the day on the Hill and say, here's WASDA position. But that's why it's so important that members of our community talk to your state legislatures and your state senators. That's why our board routinely talks to our elected legislative reps and state senators to talk about, we might say, here's what WASDA's priorities are, but we have to then talk to them about what the Peninsula School District's priorities are. And it's a fine line that we have to sort of walk about that. That's why we like to meet with them separately. But by getting those position statements on there this year, then we can work with WASDA statewide to move those positions on literacy to the top 10, to the top 5. So that's why getting rid of the weighted vote, I think, will be helpful for districts across the state. Thanks. I have one. So last week, Carson and I got to attend the Goodman Middle School VPO. It was really nice. There's probably 30 people in there. It was a very robust conversation. And I just have to say that I said this to them. Our volunteer parent organizations around the district are so critical because of the fact that we don't get as much state funding as we need. And we do get the levy, but the levy doesn't pay for everything. So having our volunteer parent organizations out there across the district is just super important, and really honored to be able to go and talk to them. So, thank you.
Sorry, fun follow-up for that one. So, not that there are any kids in the audience tonight, but my daughter came home from Purdy today. They're doing a new fundraiser that I think we got the invite for the glow dance for the EPO. And what I did not realize is your kids might be too old, but have you heard of Dude Perfect? Okay. So this is all sponsored by, evidently, Dude Perfect. The YouTube sensation has donated millions of dollars to help schools in the form of these fundraisers across the country. So this is actually Dude Perfect affiliated glow dance fundraiser. So she came home with her first pledge, and she got a little Dude Perfect keychain. And I'll tell you what, I didn't realize it until today, but I'm very interested to know how that like if leveraging that, the kind of notoriety of Do Perfect will actually bump up those numbers, because like, holy cow, are the kids excited that they're doing a Dude Perfect fundraiser. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to mention again, we talked about this before the meeting, but I had a chance to, we both did, to be judges for the Shark Tank Innovation Competition at Pioneer Elementary last Friday, and it was so fun, and the kids were just incredible. And what did they say? There was 49 of them or something? 40, and because we just judged the top 5, the finalists, who presented their innovation, their idea, and how, did these elaborate videos and all this about how it could save money and be great for the environment, and just, fill a need that exists. And the winner was like packaging material that's biodegradable, that was going to be good for bees, and because it was going to have seeds and different lavender and some other things in there that it can go in the garden right after you get it from Amazon or whatever. It was very clever. So that was the winner. But all the students did a fantastic job of presenting, and just really, all of us that judged talked about how we use communication and innovation and collaboration in our, no matter what you do when you grow up, these are important skills, and the kids are just already at the age of 10, just really, really well on their way in that. And the only last thing is, this just a question, I should have asked it when you were talking during your superintendent's report. Do we typically, when we have some sort of bizarre inclement weather, like super cold or a ton of snow, do we typically have building administrators check their building, like if it goes several days? I just never thought of this before, figured I'd ask you now. Or do we often discover these kinds of things when school resumes?
It's not uncommon that we discover. I also live with a superintendent that had 2 busted pipes, and he got a phone call from a community member that saw it coming out. So it's not uncommon. It was just uncommon where, this was way tucked back in, so.
Yeah, no, it's happening everywhere, so it's not
Yeah.
bad. I just didn't know if normally our policy.
Yeah,
is,
we
but
typically don't have our administrators go into the building unless, it's,
there was a reason.
yeah, there was a reason.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right.
Well, this is the fun part of being the superintendent and living with another superintendent in the middle of the night. We are in touch with all of the Kitsap superintendents. I know that we worked together. There were some cancellations of athletic events and things of that nature. We were just fortunate. We didn't have a lot of people that were out and about tonight, and so we will be in close contact. We have been assured that it should be fine by the morning. However, we're going to be up probably late. So Dawnette texted me while I was sitting here and said we have people that go out and drive very, very early in the morning. That used to be my job. Now we have people scattered throughout that do that as well, but so it's not a 2-hour delay yet.
Okay.
We don't have enough information yet, so.
It'll look like the Buffalo Bills.
Well, if it does look like that, then you can be assured, but.
So everyone get up on time tomorrow, plan on being at school on time, and check your texts before you go. Our next meeting is going to be on January 30th here at Swiftwater at 6:00 p.m. And with that, we are adjourned. Drive home very safely, everyone. Thank you.